Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Dave Chauhan. Dave is a leadership coach and advisor who believes that today isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning how to steer through uncertainty with purpose. With over 17 years of experience leading teams, from factory floors to executive boardrooms, across multiple industries, Dave has seen firsthand how outdated leadership playbooks fail in today's fast-changing world. He is singing from the same sheet of music as me.
Absolutely.
Instead of doubling down on control, he champions a more human-centered, values-driven approach, one that embraces courage, clarity, and compassion. Dave is the author of Captain, Set Sail, and the creator of the Nautical Leadership Framework, a practical, metaphor-rich guide for navigating the complexities of modern leadership. As a speaker, strategist, and co-founder of Purple Spark Advisory, Dave helps Australian subject matter experts move from chaos to clarity, building sustainable strategies and cultures that actually work. Through his writing, advisory work, and speaking engagements, Dave empowers leaders to stop racing for impact and start charting their course. If you're ready to rethink leadership in a way that's bold, grounded, and deeply human, Dave's your man. I am truly pleased and delighted to have Dave with me here this morning. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
G'day, John. Honorable. Thank you for that introduction. I am humbled to be spending time with you and to be speaking with your audience today.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will send you a copy of this, which I tell people many times is suitable for framing on your refrigerator so that people can come by and say, yeah, there I am right there. So it's a good thing. So Dave, let me begin by adding a little bit of a personal touch this year in my podcast. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what were some of the influences in your early life?
Interesting life I've been blessed with. I was born to parents from Punjabi ethnicity from India. I was born in Libya. I remember mom and dad, they were part of embassy and Secretary of Health work. At some stage, among three kids, the middle one being me, they decided that I'd be better raised by my grandmother in India. So I ended up moving back to my grandmother, and my life's epiphany was that at some stage when my mom and dad reappeared, I had developed this understanding that my grandmother was my real mom. Early on, I had this trauma dealing with two sets of parents, all coming with great intentions, but me feeling that as if I'm being stolen away from my family, which was my grandmother. Because when mom and dad came, I thought they're taking me back. They are separating me from my grandmother. In some way, your life shapes you, and that shaped me in who I am today. With two sets of parents with different value system meant early on I was given opportunity to be disciplined, at the same time by my grandmother's value system, I was given opportunity to pursue something deeper, meaningful, the old age sage wisdom, as they say. And happens to be, I didn't realize until my late 30s, I was working on myself, disciplining myself to be a better, call it a corporate leader, a disciplined professional. But at about in last few years, I started finding that, wait a minute, something more is kicking in my own life. And that was my grandmother's teaching when she was talking to me. There's nothing spiritual. What I'm talking about is it was all two different sets of value systems shaping a human. And here I am today.
Yeah, so interesting. We are shaped by my parents, uncles. I talk all the time about my dad was a Navy guy. My Uncle Gus was a Navy guy. And all I did was I grew up, I wanted to be in the Navy, and an officer in the Navy. I always knew that. And I achieved that dream and served for 11 and a half years active and then finished my time in the reserve. So by the way, Dave, I am big on nautical metaphors. I've traveled the oceans of the world, so I get it. And I was pretty good at navigation myself. So let's dive a little into your book. Your book, Captain Set Sail, introduces the Nautical Leadership Framework. What inspired you to use a maritime metaphor to reframe leadership?
Two things I'm going to talk about. Number one, my own personal aspect, me being human, me being who we are. We are sum up of our fears, things that encourage and excite us. Something that has always terrified me is this feeling of being on high sea. That makes me feel that leadership for me was always getting into this role where you have to step up. You have to have a lot of courage to deal with it. In a simple, silly, stupid way, I sometimes explain, it's Batman's fear of bats made him Batman. It's the same way for me. There was this fear of ocean, water, made me feel that, okay, there is leadership that you have to step up. As far as nautical framework from that sense is concerned, throughout my life, I paint a lot. Even growing up, I used to paint. Reflecting back, those beautiful ships and captains and sailors that I painted, because for me, that was the illusion of courage, valor. That was the feeling of that, you have to step up and be there for your people. But from intellectual perspective, when I started looking at all the stories that world has been blessed with in terms of coming from nautical world, and I'm talking about going back to even 300, 400 years ago when we were discovering these new land and continents. And what happened after discovery is a different part. I'm talking about the act of discovering and leaving your original land to find a new land. You will see that there were some captains, there were some navigators who were repeatedly successful, and some did not make their maiden voyage. And it wasn't because they had better ships. It wasn't they had better compasses. It wasn't that they had better weather guidance. In fact, there wasn't any of that stuff. And maps were not even there. Any map you would get, you would be lucky enough to call it if this map was even real. Those maps were usually drawn by illusion of what we think was on the other side of the ocean. When you start looking at these patterns, the common narrative that appears, and then, I started discovering it more and more, was that it was happening in the confinements of the ship and the captain. The chemistry between how you're using your resources, how you're dealing with your crew, that was defining the success that usually will end up in that story, in that discovery. I started putting those concepts out of the nautical framework and I started applying these concepts. How does this system venture itself when we're talking about a corporate situation, for profit, when we are talking about even political situation, high stress situations? And you will start seeing this common rationale behind that the elements of leadership and the qualities of leadership essentially don't change. Your situation might change, but what's happening in this proverbial ship generally stays the same. And that will declare the output and decide what will happen to the end of that story, not how beautiful and great your ship and tools are. So that's the framework in essence.
It's so interesting you should mention that. I appreciate that from all of us who've ever gone to sea and who have been in storms. And I have been in some pretty hellacious storms where you're just hanging on. A third of the ship is seasick and it's a mess. You just soldier on, as they say, or sailor on, I'd like to say. So I appreciate that very much. And it's very true. It's very interesting. In fact, you just ticked something here. And I want to go down this road and get your reflection on it. One of the things you hear about a lot of these days when you talk about leaders and leadership is this notion of, and I can't even begin to tell you how many conversations I've had about this on the podcast, authenticity, empathy, these characteristics. And a ship is a great metaphor to actually come at this. The nautical metaphor really fits to me. One of the things I learned as a very, very young naval officer, and one of the most important things I learned was the importance of trust. Trust is the fuel that runs every engine of every relationship. And I don't care what kind of relationship it is. If you have no trust, you have no relationship. One of the things I'm focusing on is this notion that leadership is not contained in the leader only. Leadership is what people do together.
Yep.
So the notion of the leader having empathy and authenticity, we'll just stop there and talk about those two. Perhaps called a trait of the leader. What happens when instead of just the leader having that, the leadership dynamic of people doing leadership together shifts from being a trait to being a value held by everyone in the group? That trust, I'll throw trust in there. Trust, empathy, authenticity is really how the group deals with issues every single day. The goal here is this. When the leader leaves, if authenticity and empathy belong to the leader and the leader's taken out of the dynamic, what happens to the group? Now what do? The other side of that is if empathy, authenticity, trust belongs to the group, this is our MO, modus operandi, this is how we work. When the leader gets taken out, it doesn't affect the group that as much as one might think. In fact, what may happen is now the new leader has to operate according to the norms of the values, which include authenticity, empathy, and trust. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
John, I'm not sure if I was prepared for conversation to get this deep this quickly, but I'm loving it. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I'm genuinely loving every moment of it. You mentioned a few elements, and fundamentally, leadership is an innate human need. You mentioned authenticity, trust, empathy. Let's look at our own human journey. The very moment when we are born, we come in the hands of our caregivers. Your parents, your doctors, your mom, whoever is looking after you, we don't have the choice. We're given that opportunity as we would do, and we get it. From that moment, we become a follower who's seeking care. And I have this theory in the similar sense as you said, leadership doesn't happen in one moment. Leadership happens in moments throughout your life. Leadership happens in that moment when you are being provided that care. Leadership happens when little Timmy comes back home and tells his dad that Julia was being annoying today, so I pushed her. And 40 years later, Timmy is a grown man who remembers that was my dad's leadership moment, and he told me how to behave with women. Leadership happens when you go to a small community club trying to decide what to do with $2,000 funding, whether they should buy them new jerseys or whether they should replace the signboard. Leadership happens in corporate offices, it happens in political arenas every day. You can't leave the concept of leadership away because leadership is happening when you are in your office and when you have dinner with your wife and your kids are observing how to behave and how to be a grown-up. So from that sense, leadership is innate human need. Leadership is innate human value. Leadership is innate human behavior to the point leadership becomes responsibility, obligation, duty. We can't run away from it. We are receiving leadership or we're delivering leadership. It's happening all the time. Now, my theory is that leadership never started as collection, as power, as something that became a tribal norm or a signium. Leadership started back 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, when we were in a small clan, in a group. That summer, we had some extra crop. You had extra bread, I had extra bread. And we looked around, we said, wait a minute, every season until now, we have struggled to feed us and our families. This year we had extra bread. What should we do with this extra bread? We looked around, we said, who's the person we trust? Who's authentic? Who's the person who has already exhibited these qualities? And we said, actually, would you be our leader, please? And we'll give you this extra bread. So next summer when there is no crop, you will be kind enough and wise enough to distribute it equally. That guy did a wonderful job. And we understood the concept of leadership, that leadership is basically the guy or girl who will save us, protect us, be caring to us, and make sure that we survive in the savannas. From that point, 50 years later, we forgot, because all I could see was that this guy has extra bread. That bread became rocks, stones, that became extra land, extra cattle, whatever extra. 100 years later, 200 years later, we stopped what was the reason for leadership and we started looking at the facade, that what does leadership give you in society? Influence, access to more resources, everything along with it. And at some stage, for me, if I want to emulate you as leader, who's authentic leader in the society, what can I do? I can just collect stuff. I can collect more and more stuff. So people will suddenly see from face value, John and I, we have more stuff. So from that point, and fast forward all the way to 1960s and 70s, when somehow, for whatever reason, we accepted that the definition of company is to make money. The purpose for a company is to make money as long as you do it lawfully. We have come to that era, from the point where leadership definition was to provide care, nurture, make sure we are surviving, to the point where today the definition of leadership is shareholder value, results, KPIs, next quarterly results. We have just missed the mark. We have gone too far away from the original human and fundamental need from leadership. So from that point of view, I think we have strayed quite a bit. Time has come for us to pivot back and understand and get back to the innate human desire and fundamental need of leadership and its relationship with leadership. And that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack and how people have wanted to have leaders in their life and what leadership has meant to them from the time they were children, and the father or the mother, whomever is leading them into life. So it's a very complex kind of things that all sort of come together in my mind in terms of how all those play. If I look at today, if we want to engage today's people in a leadership dynamic where people are doing leadership together, I think you're going to have to give them a lot more than just a paycheck. COVID taught us that people want more than just a paycheck. They want to have meaning in their life. They want to matter. They want their work to matter. They want to be part of an organization whose values align with their own. Meaning is the single greatest motivation force on the planet. If people derive meaning from the things that they do, they get turned on. Look at when SpaceX launches a rocket and the cameras pan over to all the people who are part of SpaceX cheering at the top of their voices when the heavy rocket lifts off. And you sit back and say, these people are engaged. These people feel as though they're part of something really special. So let me ask you this, Dave, from your perspective, how would you advise a company to create that kind of lasting, meaning-making journey for the people in their organization?
In Viktor Frankl's words, those who have a why in their life can almost deal with any how. From that sense, leaders, first of all, need to understand that their company is extension of their why, and they have to start taking that as an obligation. Most leaders are not even connected to their why. I'm deeply inspired by the likes of Simon Sinek and Viktor Frankl, as I said. If you look at the common philosophy, both from spiritual perspective and both from purely organization as organization perspective, if we look at this lens, most companies, why, their purpose is false, is empty. They're just words on wall with no meaning, anything. And we were having this conversation early on that for up to 9 out of 10 people, purpose has no meaning to employees these days. They're not engaged. It does not mean anything to them. It's mostly a corporate spiel that really looks good in their corporate presentations and perhaps in their boardroom. And that's about it. So there's a lot of work for leaders to understand and really establish that their organization is extension of their why. Now, this why needs to be, they need to make sure they have a duty and obligation toward their people. This is not just a pseudo why. Now, what's pseudo why? Pseudo why looks like a why, but it's not really a why. Pseudo purpose looks like a purpose, but not really purpose. Pseudo values. They look like values, but they are not real values. That's where the hard work starts. For leaders, they need to go and establish their why, a solid foundation based on values anchored in their purpose. Until this happens, their company and their why is not connected. And most people will say, does that mean that if I want to, my why needs to be really grandiose, my why really needs to be giving me direction, like, what I'm going to do in 50 years. I'll say, no, you're not understanding the point. The point is you need to set the direction. It could be as simple as I am going to make human lives better by economic reforms. I'm going to go and make my society, my community better by the means of my education that I've gained. You really need to understand, establish that why, and then comes the how part. Company is that how part. Company is the meaning that will give you wheels to your purpose. If that's not happening, you've already lost the game. Once this has happened, then essentially they need to decide, okay, I've already decided my why, how I'm going to do this, what I'm going to do in terms of meaningful and tangible goals that this company, this opportunity is going to provide me. Now, we're talking about SpaceX. SpaceX's mission is to take humanity to Mars, right? Now, Mars is not a point. It can be any other planet. That's what leaders need to understand. In the same sense, company is a vehicle for them to get from point A to point B. It's a journey that matters. Once this work gets done, it's deciphering what are the 10 steps that we need to do in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. Generally, I say again, there are milestones. Don't get fixated by the, that has to happen. You're working towards the longer journey. It's a long game that you're playing. And once that happens, you're translating that work into everyone's life. You also need to make sure people who are working for you as part of your team, their whys are coinciding too. And if that's not happening, for whatever reason, you're not finding the right people whose whys are coinciding. Imagine SpaceX hiring people who essentially want to just work in the stock exchange or a Wall Street company. You can't really give them a why. Both whys are right, but they are in the wrong place. They're not a right match. So the leader's next destination is getting the right people on the proverbial bus or a ship in this case, getting the right crew there. Once you start getting those right people where leader's why through the company's why is connected to people's why, that's where magic happens.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I talk a lot about mission statements these days and how important they are. They have to reflect the organization's values. I tell people all the time, in fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was doing a presentation here in the U.S. for the National Workforce Development Conference. One of the areas that I was focusing on is finding meaning. How do you find meaning and how do you give meaning if you're an organization? I was talking to people who were prospective employees in the company. And I said, look, I'm going to give you an easy formula here. First thing you want to do if you're looking for meaning in a company is get their mission statement. If their mission statement is 7 paragraphs long and you have the luxury, move on. Move on, find another company. The reason is these folks don't know who they are really. They're trying to be liked by everybody. They're trying to be judged, just as you say, in the light of corporate that says, aren't we great? Aren't we wonderful? You should love us. And we present that to the world. Now, I understand mission statements are important in terms of branding. I get that. But I always say, if you can't say it in one sentence, if you can't make it so clean and so beautiful in one sentence, where people go, yeah, I get that. I want to be part of that organization. Yeah, I want to work for those people. If you're hiring for values first, if you're looking to hire someone based on values first, then you have got to send a message that says, this is our values, so that the people who resonate with those values can say, yeah, those are my values. Those are what I want to connect up with, as opposed to casting a wide net and hoping to bring in some fish. This is not how it works. And especially if you want to keep them for 4 or 5 years, and if you truly want to engage them, if you truly want to make them owners in the outcome, in the decision-making processes of the organization. The other thing I talk about these days is hire for heart.
Yeah.
And look for people who haven't had it easy. Look at people who've dealt with very difficult, at times overwhelming odds. I have had 3 people on my podcast who've all gone to prison, and today are leaders in their corporate worlds who told me prison saved their lives. And that when they took responsibility for their lives, things started to change. People who've been through difficult times are not pushed away by something that doesn't work. If you're in a company and you reach a hard point and can't get past it, no problem, we'll get through it. We just got to figure it out. Let's sit down and figure it out. One of the things we talk about, I'm sure you've seen this so many times, is collaboration. This idea of, we need to collaborate. And the answer is, yeah, but if you work in an organization where the top 3 or 4 people have all the answers, they don't need to collaborate. They have it. They know what's going on. They're just going to tell you what to do. They have all the answers. But in this world that we live in today, the disruptive world, we have to engage ambiguity and doubt. Because when you engage ambiguity and doubt, it kicks the door open to collaboration. Because people go, I don't know. The answer. Maybe we should work together to find the answer. I'd love to get your reflection on those ideas, Dave. Before I turn it over to you, Dave, I want to say one thing I have to say. In 1997, I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and it changed my life. As far as I'm concerned, it is the source document for meaning. It's the one that matters. Go ahead, Dave. I'd love to get your reflection on some of those ideas.
Again, a lot to unpack, John. It feels like we have been drinking from same stream our whole lives. You mentioned purpose. When Viktor Frankl did his work came from tough agony, pain of his own journey. One might say, I haven't gone through that journey, so it doesn't matter. But my response would be reflect on what's happening in the world, and there is solid research and evidence now. For example, Okinawa. The whole concept of ikigai is giving people reason to live longer. There is scientific study, so much research material that's available and that's published, and people can go and start looking at it, that perhaps in the past, in previous ways of living, we were getting this meaning of purpose through spiritual, through religious beliefs. Often you can see boomer generations where the whole purpose was to rebuild nations. You could see that there was often a reason for generations to pursue something meaningful, and why they did what they did and how they left the world better than what they found. But coming back to volatility, a lot of this work comes from your field and from military services, VUCA. The whole concept of VUCA when 1960s and 1970s, when they were defining VUCA for aviation and aviators, for fighter pilots. How do you deal in machines that will travel several hundred miles in few minutes by the time, and no one's there to guide them, and you have to make decision in the split second? How do you make decisions? We know these concepts have worked in those situations. When Captain Sully Sullenberger was landing his plane in New York over Hudson, when there was no checklist there to how to land a plane on the densest populated city in the United States when both engines have essentially failed. So we know this stuff works in crisis situation for sure. But then when you look back and when you look at, okay, so let's look at this work, these kind of principles that we are talking about, purpose, relationship with volatility and ambiguity. You look back, there are leaders who have given us examples that leadership never happens when you are commanding from the helm. You have to step down, get deep, get dirty in the trenches, and do the work with your team. That kind of relationship, when you are working and you have served in armed and military forces, you would understand it takes special leaders to create that bond with the team where they are authentic, where they have to deal with their own fears, where they have to be vulnerable, where they have to say, I don't know. We are in this together and I'm on the discovery and I'm finding answers with you, not through you. You're not finding answers for me. We are finding answers together. We are in this journey together. And that takes a lot of humility. That takes a lot of courage. Often leadership is taken as quest to the next title, where leaders will leave carnage of people behind, hire and fire mentality and mindset that you were talking about earlier, that how you get people on board, that their value system is aligned, and you give them a reason that, they want to be with you for next 5 or 10 years. And that never happens when you tell somebody that you're going to make money for shareholders or the company. You have to give people a deeper reason, a real reason, so they can get out of bed every morning excited that we are going to do something meaningful today. And I think that's innate human need. That's human desire. And that's the only thing. That's a superpower to some degree. We have seen leaders, teams who were incapable, leaders who were sparsely resourced. They have done miracles in situation only because when they have given power of purpose. And when this power of purpose is not there, it might seem that we are oversimplifying leadership. It might seem that we are saying, oh yeah, leadership does not mean storytelling. Leadership does not mean communication. Yes, all that stuff is needed. But it's the same way. If I can't breathe, everything else is meaningless. Purpose is that breathing. Purpose is that soul that you have to provide to people to make sure that you're giving them a reason to get out of bed every day.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Frankl talked about meaning. There's 3 ways to create meaning. Number 1 is do something. Climb a mountain, do something every day. You go to work, you do something. Number 2 is the relationships you keep, the family and relationships, children. And the third one is to suffer nobly, make the best of a bad situation. In fact, I've mentioned this several times. When we talk about human capability, we always say there's 2 choices, fight or flight. Fight or flight. You run or you fight. But sometimes you can't run and you can't fight. So the third one is endure. Make the best of a bad situation. You see this many times where people work in jobs they can't stand, but they do it anyway. They are paying bills, putting food on the table, taking care of the family. They gut it out every day. It's all grit. I'm going to do this. I can't stand going there. It's making me crazy. And eventually I think something hopefully will. But they gut it out every day. So they have to endure. So that's the third choice, endure. And that comes directly from Frankl's work. I love that book. To me, when I read that book, it was the golden key. It was the key that said, here's how you unlock human ability. You create an environment where they come to do their best work every day, where people can garner meaning from the things that they do. Everybody wants to matter. They want their work to matter. And people are searching for control and autonomy over their destinies. If you could unlock just that, I believe that engagement in organizations would skyrocket. Because as you say, people now have a purpose. We're part of this purpose. We're part of the decision-making processes that this company uses to create whatever products or services we deliver because we have purpose. We're getting close to the end, Dave. I'm going to give you the last words. Go ahead.
John, the challenge is when leaders say they have a purpose, and often in today's world, everyone's getting slick with their marketing and all that, but their actions don't align. And that's the biggest challenge. And leaders have to, first of all, accept, and leaders are guilty of doing this, where for, like we were saying, for marketing, for presentations, we already have mission statement that are 7 sentences or paragraphs long. But when you look at it, and when you go to a boardroom and a decision is to be made, and leaders' first response will be, "No, we should get this client." Everyone else will be looking at it, but wait a minute, we know this client does dodgy business. We know their values are not aligned. We know that they're the kind of company we should not do business with. The leader will say, but next quarter, we should make 5% profit. Wait a minute. So just for 5% profit, you're saying our values don't matter? That action defines that, and you can't deny it. You can't undo it. And leaders do this all the time. And they have to accept it. More importantly, we forget why companies are there. In the same way, when you and I drive every day, we forget why we got in the car to begin with. And we started looking at, all right, there are 10 traffic lights we got to stop at. We got to make sure our car's serviced, the car's fueled up. We make sure the car gets to the mechanic every 10,000 kilometers and all that. They are rules of the game. They are the rules that you have to follow if you are driving. In the same way, for organization, results, KPIs, next quarterly results, they're rules of the game. No one is denying that you have to follow and make sure that you are pursuing and following the rules of the game. But you don't fall in love with the rules of the game. That's what leaders do today. Leaders fall in love with my shared results, my next quarterly result, and they forget that why did we get in the car to begin with? Why did we start this organization? What's the innate purpose? This is what leaders across all board, I'm not talking about just corporate. I'm talking about educational institutes where they forget that, their aim was to enlighten society by the work they're doing. Their aim was to provide more innovation, bring more patents, bring more companies, bring more success, rather than they start pursuing, we should have 47,000 students next year because this year we were other organization or other university ranked better than us because they had 5,000 more students. This push and pull that happens, and I'm talking about university system because essentially you won't expect there, but it's happening there too. So think how bad it might be in corporate world. We have seen this all now. Leaders need to define what they're there for. And that can't be their KPIs and results. If they're good managers, they should be doing that. Leadership is far more than KPIs and results. And leaders need to accept that challenge.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think what they don't realize is that they have this wealth of talent and ingenuity that will take them higher than their anticipated KPIs if they unleash it.
True.
But they're so into the weeds of managing these KPIs. If you let it go, if you just fuel the energy inside the organization, fuel the people, they're going to take you someplace you never thought it possible. And I absolutely agree with you. Dave, this has been an absolute wonderful conversation. I can't thank you enough for your time here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I wish you and your family all the greatest success in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, John. It's been an honor and my pleasure today. Thank you.
Thank you.